So you want to buy a private island, not rent one for a week with an infinity pool and a guy bringing you coconuts. Actually own one, the whole rock, the whole reef, the whole postcard. Turns out the postcard is the easy part, and everything after you sign the deed is where people quietly go broke. By the end of this, you'll know why the island itself is the cheapest thing about owning an island, why half the world's private islands are actually unsellable, and why the people who make real money in this business almost never live on the thing they bought. Private islands come in roughly 4 tiers, and the price has almost nothing to do with the size of the land and everything to do with one thing, whether you can get drinking water and electricity onto it without begging a government for permission. At the bottom, you've got bare, undeveloped islands. No dock, no power, no structure, just rock and trees, and maybe a composting situation you'll have to build yourself. Those start around $250,000 and can be had for under $1 million in places like Nova Scotia, the Philippines, or Central America. The catch is you're not buying a home, you're buying a permit application. Then there's the developed but modest tier. A few acres with a small house, a generator, a rainwater system, somewhere in the 1 to 5 million range, common in the Caribbean and parts of Scandinavia. Above that sits the resort-adjacent luxury tier, 10 to 50 million, full infrastructure, a helipad, maybe a staff cottage, the kind of place you see in a hedge fund manager's Instagram story. And at the very top, the trophy tier, private islands with deep water harbors, private airstrips, and full staff villages, 100 million and up, the kind of number where the island itself is almost a rounding error next to what it costs to make it livable. Now here's the part nobody puts in the brochure. An island's real price isn't the land, it's the logistics multiplier. A $5 million island with no existing infrastructure can easily cost another 5 to 15 million just to become inhabitable, because everything you take for granted on the mainland, water, power, sewage, internet, has to be manufactured from scratch and shipped in, piece by piece, on a boat. So how do you actually buy one? 3 real paths. The first is the open listing market. Specialty brokers like Private Islands Inc. and Vladi Private Islands who deal in nothing else, and who will happily walk you through 900 listings across 60 countries. The second is government auction or long-term lease, because in a lot of the world, you don't actually buy the island outright, you buy a 99-year lease from a national government, which sounds like a technicality until year 98 rolls around, and suddenly it very much isn't. The third path, and the one nobody advertises, is buying distressed islands from owners who got in over their heads on the maintenance costs and are desperate to unload before the next hurricane season, which brings us to the number that actually matters here. Owning the island is day one. Keeping it alive is every day after that. A mid-size private island with a functioning house burns through somewhere between $200,000 and $1.5 million a year just to exist, before you've had a single guest. Break it down and it stops sounding abstract fast. Staff first, because someone has to live there year-round even when you don't. Caretakers, groundskeepers, boat captains, typically 4 to 12 people depending on size, and offshore island labor commands a premium because, understandably, few people want to relocate permanently to a rock in the ocean. Then transport, because you can't drive to an island. Every supply run, every guest, every doctor visit is a boat or a helicopter, and a single helicopter transfer can run anywhere from $2,000 to $15,000 depending on distance and weather. Then, infrastructure maintenance. Because salt water is patient and it is coming for everything you own. Generators corrode, docks rot, solar panels get sandblasted by storms, and island contractors charge 2 to 4 times mainland rates simply because they have to bring their own materials and their own crew by boat. Then insurance. And this is where a lot of owners get their first real scare, because insuring a structure that sits directly in a hurricane or cyclone path can run 3 to 6% of the property's value annually. Meaning a $20 million island can carry an insurance bill north of $1 million a year, and that's before a single named storm actually makes landfall. And finally, the one people never see coming: sovereignty costs, property taxes, environmental compliance fees, and in a lot of jurisdictions, mandatory conservation levies. Just for the privilege of privately owning a piece of an ecosystem a government still considers a national asset. Put it all together and you get a very quiet, very expensive truth. A private island isn't a home, it's a standalone municipality, and you're its only taxpayer. So where does anyone make money on this? Turns out almost nobody makes money living on their island. They make money renting it out while they're not there. The economics flip completely the moment you treat the island as a hospitality asset instead of a residence. High-end private island rentals go for $15,000 to $200,000 a night, depending on size and exclusivity, and at even 60 nights a year booked, a mid-tier island can generate revenue that meaningfully offsets that annual maintenance bill. This is exactly why most private islands you've actually heard of are not full-time residences at all. They're rental businesses with a very good marketing story attached. An owner who visits 3 weeks a year and rents the place out the other 49. Consider a couple who bought a modest, undeveloped island for under $1 million, spent years building it out themselves with almost no outside contractors, did the labor personally to avoid the crushing cost multiplier, and ended up owning outright what would have cost 5 times as much through a developer. That patience is rare, and it's why it gets told as a success story instead of a cautionary one. Now consider the opposite pattern, the one that repeats constantly in this industry. An owner buys a spectacular island at auction, often from a previous owner who went bankrupt trying to finish it, gets it for a steep discount, and then discovers the discount existed for a reason: half-finished infrastructure, disputed water rights, a dock that doesn't meet current code, and ends up spending double the original purchase price just closing the gaps the previous owner left behind. The wild card variable in all of this is sovereignty itself, because you're never just an owner, you're a foreign entity operating inside someone else's legal system, and that relationship can turn on you fast. In several Caribbean and Pacific nations, foreign island ownership is only permitted through renewable leases, and renewal is a political decision, not an automatic one, meaning a change in government can put your $100 million investment on a countdown clock you don't control. Climate risk compounds it further, because insurers have started quietly redrawing flood and storm maps, and islands that were insurable a decade ago are increasingly landing in categories where coverage is either unavailable or priced like a losing bet. And then there's simple geography risk: erosion. Some private islands are measurably smaller than they were 20 years ago, a slow, unglamorous, unstoppable kind of bankruptcy where the asset itself is dissolving a few centimeters at a time into the tide. Because when things go wrong out here, they go wrong in ways the mainland never has to think about. A generator failure isn't an inconvenience, it's a medical emergency waiting to happen for anyone stranded on the property. A storm doesn't just damage a building, it can sever the only dock, the only access point, the only way on or off the island, for days. And a legal dispute over water rights or shoreline access with a neighboring landowner or government body can freeze a sale entirely, because who wants to buy an island where the previous owner is still in court over whether they were ever allowed to build the dock in the first place? Time to pull it together and answer the actual question. 2 scenarios, real numbers. Scenario 1. A modest developed island bought for $2 million, self-managed, rented out roughly 40 nights a year at an average of $8,000 a night. Gross rental income around $320,000. Annual operating costs, staff, transport, insurance, maintenance, land somewhere around $250,000. Net, you're clearing maybe $70,000 a year on a $2 million asset, which is a return that would embarrass almost any other investment class, except you also get to call yourself an island owner, which for a lot of buyers turns out to be the actual product. Scenario 2. A luxury island bought for $25 million, fully staffed, marketed through a high-end rental agency, booked 80 nights a year at $30,000 a night, gross rental revenue around $2.4 million. Operating costs, insurance, staff, transport and maintenance at this scale run close to 1.6 million a year. Net profit around 800,000 a year, a return north of 3% before you even account for appreciation, which sounds almost respectable until you remember that one uninsured storm season can erase a decade of it in a single week. So if you're going to buy a private island, remember the actual rule of this business. The ocean doesn't care how much you paid for the deed, and every day you're not renting it out. You're the one paying to keep the fantasy afloat.